I'd like to bring this first budget meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none, adoption of the agenda. Moved by Councillor Sentence, seconded by Councillor Neal, that Council approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Delegations. We have one delegation. William Bill Klazen, resident of Port Robinson, would like to speak on funding for the Port Robinson Eco Park South Main Street Bridge project in the current budget. Is Bill here? Welcome, Bill. You're muted. There you go. Okay, Bill, you're up.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. On behalf of the residents of Port Robinson, thank you to Mayor Ugolini and the members of council and staff who were able to attend some of the public information centers related to this project that were held in September and October of 2021. Thank you also for funding and completing the two consultants' reports to get us to this point where we now have a final conceptualized proposal for rehabilitating the South Main Street Bridge in a form that going forward is in line with the stated wishes of the village residents. It's basically an exact simple reproduction of the existing bridge, full length, plain, wide, flat, unobstructed, open deck bridge with straight railings. It's our understanding from conversations with council members that council agrees with and shares our community vision that this is a once in a lifetime investment to solidify the ongoing enjoyment of the creek's natural habitat and ecosystem features by Port Robinson residents, Thorold residents, and visitors for decades to come. As a background information for this budget meeting, you've probably all received by email a document. It looks a little longer than it is. It's large font and well spaced. Prepared by Ron Devereaux to emphasize how we use the bridge as far more than just an important pedestrian walkway. It's community-based, family-oriented, nature-related, outdoor, recreational facility and resource. What I'd like to highlight tonight are some of the logistical reasons why it's important to approve funding this year to get the project started. As outlined in the RJ Burnside Consultants presentation to you in the council meeting on November 16th and shown on the city's website of capital projects, this project would be undertaken chronologically in 4 phases, which will take several years to complete. And so that's why we think it's important that we get the ball rolling now so that it's not delayed by, at a minimum, 1 full year. The barn swallows and all the turtles in the ecosystem are officially classified as species at risk due to their generally declining populations in Ontario. Therefore, the items in phase 1 include the barn swallow nesting box to provide an alternative to the removal of their nesting sites underneath the bridge during its reconstruction, and the turtle nesting mounds to provide alternatives to the current turtle nesting sites in the roadside gravel underneath the guardrail along River Road. The RJ Burnside Consultants indicated that by government regulation, those alternatives must be in place for 1 full year before anything can begin rebuilding the bridge. So getting those items done as early as possible this year, we think is crucial. This will also provide a whole year of time for the city's operations, engineering staff to prepare for phase 2, the bridge replacement in 2023, and to continue to seek additional funds, regional, provincial, and/or federal, for this worthwhile project. It's also very important to emphasize before the start of phase 2, it must be formally recognized during the time of construction activities rebuilding the bridge, it could be out of use for a significant amount of time. This represents the risk of putting significant human pressure on the ecology and the sensitive habitat areas that exist in the creeks surrounding the bridge. And that's never really been mentioned in any of the consultants' reports or in any staff supports to the council that we know of on the subject of saving the bridge. Our concern and our emphasis that we have to acknowledge and properly address and fund before the bridge is permanently closed for rehabilitation. So specifically, if we stop all uses of the bridge that must be accounted for prior to its official closing, especially related to fishing activities. The bridge, as you know, and many of you have been there, is a popular fishing pier. If we are unable to fish from the bridge, we have to that will restrict fishing activities primarily to the shoreline. Over the years, we found a significant percentage of people who fish at the bridge come from many other regional municipalities, including Fort Erie, Port Colborne, Welland, Niagara Falls, St. Catharines, other places in Thorold. And it's a reasonable assumption that they're not really as knowledgeable as we residents are of the ecological sensitivities of the bridge area. So it's essential that pedestrian access to the whole area of the turtle shoreline habitat on the western side of the bridge. So that is from the water's edge right up to the temporary asphalt pathway must be somehow cordoned off or fenced properly prior to the start of phase 2, which would be the removal and reconstruction of the bridge. Denying access to the area must be properly explained with appropriate signage to prevent human access and to prevent it from being trampled, which would have adverse effects on the turtles' access to their egg-laying area, which has already been severely damaged or interrupted by that asphalt temporary pathway. As previously mentioned, all the turtles in Ontario are officially designated species at risk. The bridge fills many valuable, important functions for residents of all ages, all stages of life. It's important that we preserve its existing uses, quality experiences, quality values that we, residents of Port Robinson surrounding area, derive from this very simple yet iconic bridge because of its strategic location and vantage point surrounded by a mature creek ecosystem. It provides the users with a natural outdoor experience that's elevated, a midstream view. Strategically, it separates the people using it from trampling and destroying the sensitive natural habitat of the area. That prevents degrading the quality of the ecosystem and from negatively impacting its inhabitants. Therefore, the bridge expedites the essential theme. We want to enjoy it, don't destroy it. In closing, while the bridge is officially closed and under reconstruction, we're formally asking that the essential theme of enjoy it, don't destroy it be given top priority, and that a multi-year financial plan to implement the design created by Burnside will be created and passed by the current City Council. I want to thank you for the opportunity to make this presentation. We certainly look forward to getting the project started and working with all you fine people. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. As always, it's a pleasure to have you and speak, and excellent presentation. And I'll open the floor for any questions. I got Councillor Sentence.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Bill. Thank you for the presentation, Bill. Well done. I guess through you, Mr. Mayor, to staff, I had a couple of ideas that we should do, I think, before anything happens. First of all, to keep the bridge open as it is, as walking traffic, fishing traffic, so that it stays open in its current form, and start the process of moving the turtle, swallows, and the at-risk species, the bats, now to keep the project moving forward, and to figure out funding in the future budgets, and to look for grants in this time that can fund the project down the road. But I think it's important to show something so that we're going forward with this, and I don't think that would be too expensive. So maybe to Jeff, could I ask you, do I need a motion to do that, or what would you recommend?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Thanks. Excuse me. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, so I can't tell you what it would cost for the first step of the process. My preference would be to complete the research and find out what the approval process might require for the relocation of some of this habitat. I recognize how important it is to the community and the need to take advantage of some of the momentum we have with the support that's coming from the community at this time. I want to caution you though that if we get too far in front of the project without having the rest of the funding in place, any of the work we do this year might be in vain. But I can include those concerns in a report to council just to give you just kind of a broader perspective.
Councillor Sentence, is that it?
Sorry.
Go ahead. So you, a staff.
I just want to have an understanding. So you would rather do it as a report? Can it be as soon as possible so we can get this going? You need ministry approval, or what are you looking for in a report?
So what I need to do is find out what the process would be to get approval to do it. And as Mr. Claassen correctly points out, there's a certain period, a time of year, which if we have to do relocation, that this could only take place during that period of time. And I don't have those answers. I'm sorry, I don't have them for you tonight.
That's okay. Could I ask for a report then, Mr. Mayor, to come as soon as possible to keep this project going forward and so that we can start the process once we know funding and stuff like that?
Yeah, after the questions, let's get through the questions to Mr. Claassen for questions for Mr. Claassen. Anyone else? Go ahead, Councillor Hanley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just going to mention the bill next. So Bill, obviously you're looking at this over, we all know, a significant period of time over numerous years. Your objective for the first year is, I think I echo Councillor Sentence, is for the nesting boxes and for the turtles would be the first items that need to be addressed before anything can move forward. Is that correct?
Based on the Burnside report, I think Mr. Holman could probably confirm, yes, that's the case. I was just I looked at the budget documents for this year's budget. I was a little disturbed to see that the entirety of the project, the funding of the project, has been put in the deferred category. So the purpose of speaking tonight is that, I think it would be prudent, obviously, it's such a large chunk of money, to break that down and, spend what we need to now to get the ball rolling so that, and again, give time to plan and have that budget allocation each year for each of the phases of the project going forward. That's sort of our request to council.
Okay, understandably. I'll just comment again on Councillor Sentence. I'm sure he's going to want a motion forward for a report, and I'd just like to comment on that time.
Thank you. Any further questions for Bill? Councillor Decker, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I must have hit my hand in error. I apologize.
No problem. Okay, there's no further questions. Bill, I want to thank you for an excellent presentation and for all your work and commitment to moving this project forward, and we'll continue moving with this staff report. I'm sure that's going to be the next phase of this discussion. So thank you, Bill.
Thanks to all of you.
So now, Councillor Sentence, do you want to move a staff report?
Yes, please.
Seconder, Councillor Hanley, are you seconding that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so we have a motion to get a staff report on the funding for the Port Robinson Eco Park South Main Street Bridge project. I have a seconder, Councillor Hanley. Now speakers. Go ahead, Councillor Hanley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In the report, if I could, through you, Councillor Sentence, is that we know that this project is going to be over a significant period of time, numerous years. In that report, as mentioned in the Burnside, as they lay it out, could the report come back as what the estimated actual cost would be for year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4?
Sure.
Right? Instead of just being the 4.3 million, because we know the nesting has to be done first. We have to do partial demolition. We have to do the restructuring phase. We have to see to it that alternate sources are met for the recreational purposes that are that's being for used now, so.
Is that good,
We can add
Counselor?
that counselor sentence.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
He's
good.
good with that. Okay, is there any further discussion on that? Go ahead, Counselor Longo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question, I guess, to Mr. Holman. He's being asked to do a report here. Yeah, we're in the first phase of 2 budget meetings, and I think the intention, by the sounds of it, would be to get something in this year's budget, but I'm not sure Mr. Holman can do all this work in one night. So I'm just wondering if that's, first of all, what council intention is here, and if Mr. Holman can comment whether he can get this done, because I support trying to do this in phases, but how will we have an accurate amount going forward if we need to budget for year 1?
Go ahead, Jeff.
No, so, Mr. Mayor, thanks, Councillor Longo. It really depends on how quickly I can get a response from the folks in the Ministry of Environment and Conservation and Parks. It's not just a matter of filling out an online application. There may be some additional inventory work that's required, and I'm hoping that we don't have to go back out and hire a consultant to help us with this, because we have studied this area quite extensively. I'm hoping that I can turn it around in the next, maybe the second meeting in March. But if I get the information sooner, I can bring it back. It depends really on how you want to fund it. If you want to have the funding straightened out as part of this year's budget, or if we're going to eventually fund it from reserves, I'll leave that up to the finance director to give us some advice on that.
Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Longo. Did you have any more to add?
No, not really, but I guess maybe I'll ask Councillor Sentence what he would like to see done here in terms of the financial aspect.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Longo. My first intention was maybe this could be possible to put into budget tonight for this first phase, or just the moving of the turtles and the swallows, but it sounds like we need ministry approval. So I would like to get that back as soon as possible. I don't think it can go in budget tonight, but bring it back as soon as possible, and then find out the cost. Councillor Hanley's idea was a good idea, and then I just want to make sure this project is going forward. So at a future date, if Jeff could bring that back, and then we can discuss it and put it through, or not.
Great. Thanks for that answer.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't know if this question is for Jeff or for Maria, but if the project in total is 4.3 million, then in that report of their stages, do we have an idea? I'm probably saying what you're already asking, but an idea of how much each stage would be if we didn't get any additional funding?
Go ahead, Jeff.
Excuse me. Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'll do my best to try and break it out into the multi-years. There may be some things that we have to double up on because of maybe conditions of funding or whatever. Like you might have to do the demolition and the construction within a certain period of time. I really don't want to mislead you by saying that we'll have accurate numbers, but we'll do our best based on what the direction that's coming out of the recommendation of the EA and the study.
Okay.
Okay, no, and that's fine. I wouldn't imagine it would be completely accurate. I guess this is maybe a general question, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
For Maria, but we have like 3 large projects, and we're trying to change the subject for this being one of them, but we're not going to finish those projects in 1 year. So could we not add to the levy a little bit each year? Like, let's say it's 4 million and we just want to increase, in 3 increments every year. If we know the project will probably in totality take us, 5 years or something. Like, is that a possibility that we set it up like that instead of hitting the levy with a full 5% this year? I'm just throwing numbers out there. I know that's not what it is, but
That's a good point. I'll ask our Director of Finance, Maria, to comment.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we do have a policy, and best practice would be that when you are engaging, when you're approving projects, that you're approving the full amount. If you're phasing the project, that's different. But if you're going ahead and you're embarking on the full project, best practice in our policy would indicate that you do have your first year funding in the first year. Problem being is, if you don't do it that way, all you're doing is burdening the next year's budgets. So I would recommend that council does stick with our existing policy, and if you do have projects that you wish to consider, that you put them in as per the policy. That you don't phase the funding because you're not phasing the projects.
Is there any?
Okay, but I guess I would see that of, like, let's say we had, okay, let's just say the project was 3% and our budget is 2% and we want to phase that in each year, then we're already past it, but we know that, yeah, we are saying for sure you're gonna have your regular budget plus the 1% that was passed the year prior. So I don't know if I see it as a burden. I just think it's almost like a payment plan for our residents versus taking it all out of your checking account.
Yeah. And again, we have policies, we have recommendations, but ultimately council can do as they see fit.
Okay. Any further, Councillor
Thank
Wilson? Oh, anyone else? Councillor Hanley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just going to suggest that, why don't we wait for the financial and then when we get to the deferrals motion section of the budget, because there's 3 heavy items there. You know, I have an estimated tax increase for the Port Robinson Bridge reconstruction, what we might be looking at. But when we get to deferral motions, then we can decide as a council on the deferral if we want to do the project in full. I'm thinking it's going to be a net increase in the tax base, 3%.
Anyway, okay, Councillor, that's.
So we'll do it
Yeah.
After report.
Well,
Accept the
we'll be doing
report and
that,
then do
but
it that
we're
way.
still
I'm thinking.
asking for the report, okay? The report,
Yes.
Jeff still has to do the report, but then we can also have further discussion on when we get to deferrals. Absolutely. Okay, so we have the motion for the staff report. Mover, Councillor Senton, seconder, Councillor Hanley. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay. So now we're going to move on to the main agenda, and we're going to open up with the Chief Administrative Officer, Manoj Dalwaria's opening remarks. And then after he's done, I'll turn it over to Maria Morrow for a budget overview. So go ahead, Manoj.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will provide a brief overview of 2022 budget. And following my remarks, as Mayor has pointed out, Ms. Maria Morrow, our Director of Finance, will highlight areas of impact in her budget presentation. Last month, Council was provided with the budget binder, and I understand that you had a chance to review it in sufficient detail, as many of you have reached out to our staff asking questions and seeking clarifications. Additionally, the draft was posted on City's website for members of public to review it. So tonight, we are going to present draft operating and capital budgets for discussion and your approval. As done in the past and continued this year, the water and urban services area, like sanitary service and sidewalk, those budgets, which are separate budgets, will be presented to Council in the coming months. So like in the previous years, staff has extensively worked to bring this draft budget to your consideration. And to be consistent, staff had tried to keep the net levy increase in the base budget to similar levels as what had been presented to Council in the past years. However, as you can see in your budget binder, that there are preferred deferred lists which need your special consideration. These items are mainly pertaining to additional staff positions and 2 key projects, including new fire station and the renovation of Operations Center. Staff should Council decide to bring these items forward from the list, please do so for discussion and inclusion in the main budget. Also, there are several items in the deferred list that you may want to bring forward to be included in the main budget. I would like to mention that the taxes in Thorold are on the lower end of the spectrum compared to other municipalities in Niagara. As you are aware, the city's portion of budget only represents 40% of the tax bill for the average residential home. The other portions, such as the urban service area levy, hospital levy, regional levies, and the educational levies, constitute the other 60% of the tax bill. I would like to reiterate that staff have worked diligently over the past several months to balance the need of the community as outlined in our strategic plan, while making sure that the taxes are kept low. At this time, I'll pass it on to our Director of Finance, Ms. Maria Moro, who will do the budget presentation. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And now, as our normal budget procedure, is our budget overview from our Director of Finance, Maria Morrow. Go ahead, Maria.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to try and see if I can share the screen. Okay. Okay. Welcome to Budget 2020. 2022, last 2 years already. The city issues tax bills, which encompass not only the city taxes, but the regional and education taxes as well. City general budget taxes represent about 40% of the total bill across all property classes, with the bulk of the taxes being for the region and for education. As the CAO mentioned, the city has 4 budgets: the general operating budget and the capital budget, which form part of this package this evening, along with the water and sewer budgets, which will be addressed later in this quarter. I'd like to talk a little bit about growth. There is a progression to growth with new construction development. New infrastructure is required. The new construction brings in more people, be it residents, tourists, or employees. This increase in infrastructure and people will increase the demands for service, which in turn increases our operating expenditure. The demand for service starts with the planning department, moves to the building department, and as the developments occur, this filters down to and requires increases to all departments to service the established developments. For example, snow plowing, grass cutting, water and sewer, roads, street light, hydro and maintenance, fire services, capital renewal provisions and maintenance, billing and administrative functions. It should be remembered that the growth dollars may be received up front, and then once critical mass is achieved, then additional costs become required for staffing and for equipment and for asset renewal. When we look at funding sources, there is an interrelationship between all the various sources, in that a reduction in one area must be funded from the other areas, and normally this falls to property taxes. This shows the funding options for both capital and operational expenses. Some of the items, such as grants, investment income, are beyond our control, so we need to consider the other areas which we can control so that the burden is not totally loaded onto property taxes. While reserve funding for ongoing operating expenses does occur, it is a very short-sighted move, and it really shouldn't from a best practice perspective, as it is not sustainable. In addition, we should consider that sufficient reserves exist, even for capital, so that it eliminates large bump ups in future levies. When we compare property taxes, this chart depicts from the BMA Municipal Competitiveness Study for 2021, a comparison of the average taxes across the region by home type. You will note that Thorold is below the regional average for all of these home types. As a point of reference, 1% net levy change equates to about $173,000, and a 1% levy change equates to about $17 to the average residential home valued at $264,500. The budget as presented reflects a 5.97% gross departmental increase with 1.93% infrastructure levy increase. Growth is estimated at 5.05 for a total net levy increase for the draft of 2.85%. Our gross operating budget amounts to $26.9 million, with transportation, which includes transit and winter control, along with fire expenses amounting to 42% of the gross total expenditures. The package provides information on the specific impacts by each of the various departments, but I'd like to provide you with just a global summary of some of our major impacts. Salary, benefit, and honoraria costs for the proposed budget represent about 46% of the expenditures in the total budget. Increases to wages and benefits for existing approved staffing and council to cover contractual increases, step increases, OMERS, statutory and health benefits, along with the elimination of a position approved in previous budgets, are forecast to increase by about $344,000. We see requirements for a number of new or changed positions totaling roughly $480,000, but some of these are funded from non-levy sources such as building permits and water and sewer. This brings the levy impact for this category to about $619,000. The next impact I'd like to highlight is asset renewal. This chart demonstrates how we are progressing in the ability to sustain our non-water and sewer assets. Please note that these are annual estimated totals. The green bar is the current budget provision. The yellow bar is the amortization expense based on historical costs. And the red bar is where we need to be on an annual basis to maintain our assets based on their replacement costs. We recently completed our asset management plan for infrastructure, and we see that we need an additional $6.2 million per year to fully fund our assets. Our asset management plan for non-core infrastructure is currently underway and is expected to exacerbate the funding shortfall. You can see that we are not funding sufficiently in any of the categories, and sustaining our assets is an area that we must continue to address, not just from best practice goal, but from a provincially mandated obligation. Asset renewal funding ensures that we are able to proceed to repair and replace assets in a timely fashion without a significant impact to the levy. And respectfully, we see the impact of not adequately funding our assets when we get a year like this year where we've got some huge projects that are facing us. Oops. There are a number of legislated obligations from the province in respect to assets, which have and will have an impact on us over the next few years. We have completed the first two requirements and will complete the asset management plan for non-core assets early this year. We are well ahead of schedule for completion. Our projected phase-in for assets was estimated at $413,000. To mitigate the levy impact, only $339,000 was included. Again, we should anticipate increased requirements in future years once we have a complete picture of the non-core assets from the asset management plan currently underway. We do have a number of large capital projects that we propose to finance internally and that are included in the budget, that being the Fire SCBA project and the Arena Ice Plant and Roof. In addition, staff have utilized part of the 2021 surplus to pay down the senior center loan, thereby freeing up some levy funding in 2022 to fund part of the capital. The net impact here is $91,000 to the levy. The next one is the Canada Summer Games. In the absence of updated information for the base year of operations, we have used the numbers from the PwC pro forma estimates, and these are the same numbers that were provided in the staff report of December 2019 and which have been posted on our website since that time. Based on these numbers, we budget for net expenses of $605,000. Previous budgets had provisions of $285,000 for a levy impact in 2022 of $320,000. COVID will continue to have an impact on our budget. When we prepared the draft budget, we anticipated additional screening and cleaning costs, which we proposed to fund from the reserves as one-time items. Since that time, provincial mandates have forced closures for all of January. This will reduce the need for the screening and cleaning, but will also reduce the arena revenues. We propose funding for this shortfall to also come from reserve. The biggest impact in this area comes from the loss of the Safe Restart grant from the province, which we received last year, totaling $304,000. To date, no new funding has been announced for 2022 for COVID items. We do see impacts for contracted services for things such as repairs and maintenance, software annual fees, professional fees, and we anticipate an impact here of about $148,000. Similarly, materials and supplies, water and sewer charges, memberships and training, uniforms, safety clothing and supplies will also impact the budget by about $100,000. For other expenses, we recently renewed our insurance package and deductible provision, and we will see an increase to the general operating levy from insurance of about $99,000. On the flip side, provisions for tax write-offs can be reduced by $100,000, and this leaves a levy impact for these two items with a savings of $1,000. Operations has some plans for traffic signs and pavement marking, and this will add $66,500. And you'll note that included in this are 2 speed monitoring signs at a cost of $15,000. We provide a grant to the library for which they've requested an increase of $30,000 or 4.4%. In addition, the budget includes provisions for increases to community improvement plan grants, specifically the tax increment grants. We expect an increase of about $10,000 for a total rebate of $297,000. In order to balance the budget, we have utilized reserves for this. Additionally, community grants funding envelope has been increased by $31,200, again funded by reserves. The net impact here is $30,000. There we go. We anticipate a transit cost increase of $36,300 from the Transit Commission. To partially offset this increase, we will see an increase to the provincial gas tax funding of $11,000, which was included in the draft budget. We were notified last week of additional funding in the amount of $19,800 to transit for a net levy impact of $5,500. And we have modified the budget accordingly, and we'll provide you with an update later on. We do project a carry forward in the Safe Restart Transit grant of about $88,000. And this can only be applied dollar for dollar to any COVID-related transit impacts. On the revenue side, we generally will see increases to revenues with the exception of the OMPF grant, which the government continues to phase out. I do want to raise a caution with respect to the supplemental tax revenues. These have been continually growing due to the level of new homes and development being built. We are now at a total revenue expected of $1.2 million, which is an increase of $400,000 over last year. While this should not be an issue while growth continues in the coming year, it will become an issue and an exposure if and when development starts to drop. Positive increases to revenues will reduce the levy impact by $710,000. To mitigate the impact, we have used some reserves. The bottom line levy totaling about $657,000. We've highlighted some of these. It's the COVID screening and cleaning, the Canada Summer Games event, community grants, the community improvement plan, and the senior center loan pay down. So we saw that your draft budget had a net levy increase of 2.85%. We heard that we did receive some additional provincial gas tax that we've now applied to the budget, and this brings the change to 2.74% revised. The city represents an average of about 40% of the total bill, incorporating all property taxes. So this equates to a 1.1% estimated average increase to the total tax bill across all properties for the city's general budget. For the residential class, the average home will see a $44 increase from the city's budget. Again, a 1.1% increase to the overall bill. We estimate that the impact to the bill, including the city, region, education, hospital, and urban area, will be about $87 or 2.3%. But I should note that these are estimates only because we have not yet seen education rates or tax ratios, and the regional rates are not yet finalized. The report includes listings which total $33.7 million in reductions and deferrals that have been used to reduce the levy impact, with the largest items being facilities renewal for the Operations Center and Fire Hall Station 1, Broderick Avenue, and the Port Robinson Echo Park. From a strategic plan perspective, all of these are included as priorities, with the Operations Center as a Tier 1 priority, Broderick and Port Robinson Park as a Tier 2, and the fire station as a Tier 3 priority. The presence of any item on the list does not mean that staff are supportive of the reductions or that the items are not needed, merely that the overriding factor was levy impact. We do see the ramifications of continued deferrals and insufficient funding of asset renewal, as we now have these large projects all overdue at the same time. Due to the extensive list of deferrals, staff have provided a suggested preferred deferred list based on staff recommendations. Council can review these along with the other deferral as part of your deliberations. The total capital budget is for new capital works of $17.1 million, with 54% related to core infrastructure. There are carry forward projects valued at $15.9 million for a total project slate of $33 million. The major projects included are St. David's Road from Queen to Ormond Street at $5 million, the Rolling Meadows Park at $2 million, and Arena Works at $2.1 million. Over the next 10 years, we estimate capital project works of $162 million. We do note that this is merely a forecast and is not a firm commitment on the timing of projects. Council prioritizes projects on an annual basis. The asset management plan for non-core infrastructure is also presently underway, and this will impact upon the 10-year forecast and our project requirements. The report also identifies that total capital funding gap that the city faces over the next 10 years is estimated at $59 million. This will require the need to issue debt and to incur debt servicing costs in our annual budgets, less any grants or fundraising that we are able to garner. We need to remain cognizant of this today as projects are approved, as this may impact on our ability to proceed in the future. We need to ensure that as we prioritize projects and make decisions that we take a long-term view. The city is presently very well positioned from a debt standpoint, with only $705,000 outstanding projected at the end of 2021 relating entirely to City Hall. This will be fully paid off by 2026. In addition, we have financed a number of capital projects internally, again with payback over a number of years, and these total $5.1 million. The city in 2011 committed $5.7 million towards the new hospital. We levy $298,000 per year as a separate levy on the tax bill, and this will be there until 2026. This slide depicts our reserve position, excluding hydro. While we estimate the combined available balance of $41.4 million, in reality, the bulk of the holdings are in development charges, water and sewer, restricted and legislated reserve funds. Available balances for operating and capital are estimated at $9.2 million. However, the target for these operating and capital reserves should be $14.7 million. So we are underfunded in our reserve levels, and staff would caution against depleting reserves even further, as reserve erosion may solve an issue in the current year, but will negatively impact on future budgets. For hydro, the projected interest, as an interest rate environment is still quite low, is $356,000, with the utilization proposed for 2020 directed to debt servicing City Hall, capital asset transportation, and capital asset general provisions. And we do anticipate with a recovering interest rate market that this will increase in future years. Support to the levy for this year is 2.1%. Lastly, I'd like to, we do have a number of risks and opportunities that may lead to positive or negative variances to the 2022 results that we need to remain cognizant of. Things like COVID, any in-year overruns or emergencies can lead to negative variances. New grant programs requiring municipal contribution or replacing existing funding, the level of supplemental tax revenues, the actual operating costs for the Canada's Summer Games for the startup year 2022, and general revenue and expenditure estimates can be higher or lower than the budget. Staff would further respectfully suggest that it should be the budget that establishes service levels, and that in-year overruns or adjustments should be limited to emergencies and uncontrolled items or grant programs, and not to introduce new programs, projects, or services. This is a suggested process that has worked well in the past. Council is able to ask any questions or bring forward any items in each of the sections. Any changes to the draft budget are voted on by council as you go through the sections. These items can be reconsidered at the end of the budget process immediately prior to final adoption of the budget. This ensures that we differentiate between general discussion and changes, which are formalized and recorded in the minutes. Respectfully, we would draw council's attention again to the preferred, deferred, and to the deferred section. This is a suggested process, and of course, council is free to follow any process that they wish. And that concludes my presentation, and I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Thank you. So before we go into the operating budget, if there's any questions for our Director of Finance, Maria Morrow, pertaining to the presentation, I'll open the floor for that. And can I get to a full screen, please?
Sure. Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
No, that's fine. It's just so I can see who wants to speak. It's easier to...
Stop share. There we go.
Okay, I have Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Maria. That was a great presentation. I don't have any questions, actually. You answered anything that I had in the presentation, actually. So, but thank you very much to all staff for their hard work on this budget. I can only imagine how painful of a process it is to prepare, because I found it painful to read. I'm just joking. Sorry. I thought I'd start us off with a joke.
Thank you.
But no, you did a great job.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Wilson. That was, everybody worked really hard on it.
As always, a great job. Questions relating to the presentation? Go ahead, Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick question to the Director of Finance. Can you explain, you talked a little bit about supplemental tax revenue. Can you explain what exactly that is for me, please?
Sure. What impact, through you, Mr. Mayor, what impact does is every year they, they go along and they pick up properties for inclusion in the assessment roll. Due to timing, they can't always pick up all the properties that have been built. And they actually have 2 years after the property has been occupied to pick it up for taxes. Those are called supplemental or omit taxes. So what it is those are properties that are not included in the current year's assessment roll and in the current year's tax levy. What happens is MPAC will notify us, they send us listings every month of properties that were not included in the assessment roll, and we bill those out as we go. Because of our development, that is pretty substantial now. You know, we're budgeting $1.2 million, which is great, but you know, I just want to let council know that, you know, at some point, perhaps the development will not be as robust as it is now, and this will be a budget impact. So at some point, we may want to start scaling back the supplemental tax revenue and start maybe reserving it so that, you know, when the development does, you know, start to dry up, that we don't have a $1.2 million hit to the budget. I can tell you when I started, we had $60,000 in supplemental revenues. And that was the amount for years and years and years until, you know, we got into this boom.
That's a great answer. Thank you very much. I was totally unsure what that was. Thank you for the presentation. It was very, very well done.
Thank you, Councillor Longo. I got Councillor DeRose. Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Maria, great presentation as usual. And as Victoria said, Councillor Wilson, it was painful to read. I still have nightmares from my accounting classes in university. I just had a question for you from page 30, the arena works, 10.1 million. Can you just explain that? I didn't understand what that was on page 30 of your presentation. What that refers to, the 10.1 million. Is that just the arena cost for the next few years? I'm assuming it's the newer arena downtown.
I can look at the 10-year forecast. I can tell you what page it's on, and then perhaps if you have specific questions, you can refer them to Mr. Dre. So it's on page 73, the 10-year forecast, and it's right at the top. You can see the first section is the arena, and you can see that the bulk of it is for the James White Arena rehabilitation at $10 million.
Okay, can I just get more through you, Mr. Mayor, can I get more clarification from Curtis Dre, please?
Is Curtis on? Yeah.
Okay, good evening. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So that's essentially a placeholder until we determine what we're going to be doing with that facility. It's allowing us a placeholder so that we don't lose sight of it.
Sorry, can you repeat that, Curtis? I couldn't hear you very well.
Sorry about that. I'll speak louder. So that's essentially a placeholder for potential future opportunity with that facility. So depending on what we determine that space should be used for, whether it's bulldoze it, rehabilitate it, or whatever we decide to do as a council, that money's there as a placeholder. So once we have a vision for that space, then it's essentially a placeholder.
Okay. So the James White rehabilitation. Okay, so on top of that, what's the new scoreboard? Is that for the newer arena, the Doherty Arena?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that would be the replacement of the existing scoreboard in the Frank Doherty Arena. The existing one is, again, it's coming up to its life expectancy, so just trying to plan out for future expenses.
Okay, and Maria, does this have any budget impact, or this is just going forward for future, looking ahead?
Through Mr. Mayor, this is simply a roadmap to give council an indication of what projects may be coming along in the next 10 years and how we are positioned from a funding perspective. But again, I caution that it is just a roadmap. These are not projects that are necessarily cast in stone, along with the timing may not be cast in stone. Because every year council will go through and you'll do this exercise that we're doing this year. We'll bring projects forward We may have to defer some to mitigate the levy impact. So it does not have a budget impact this year, but I think overall what's important is that we do have, along with, you know, most of the other municipalities in probably in the world or in Ontario, we do have a capital funding shortfall. And that's really what this is meant to provide council with is we don't have enough money to do everything that we need to do without it impacting on the levy in future.
So none of these are set in stone, correct?
That's correct. That's correct. Okay. Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Maria and Curtis. Also, Maria, I just wanted to, you mentioned about the plus minuses of some things that are still question marks. And you said the actual startup cost for the Canada Summer Games is still not known. Is there a deadline when that will be known?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, what will happen is it is a little bit of an anomaly year. The substantial completion and occupancy probably won't be until, you know, end of January, mid-February sort of thing. From there, they'll have to formally hire the independent operator. In August, you've got the actual games sort of, you know, that are going to occur. So at this point, until we have an opportunity to sit and go through, because part of the independent operator's job will be to kind of, you know, review the PWC estimates, try to come up with, you know, what does a base year look like, you know, for example. So until we have that opportunity to do that, the PWC estimates could be high or they could be low. And at this point, we don't know. So in the absence of any other information, we've used the PWC estimates, but with the caution that they are estimates and there may be a favorable variance or there could be an unfavorable variance.
So Maria, if this starts after our budget's decided in the next few days, or comes up and is actually a number is given to us down the road, does that mean during the course of the 2022 year, the levy can change?
No, what you'll have, no, through you, Mr. Mayor, once the levy's set, the levy is set. We issue the tax bills based on that. From there, you're going to have positive and negative variances. You hope that overall you have a positive variance or a surplus, because if you have an overall negative for the corporation, then you need to make sure that you have reserves in place to fund the deficits.
So any money negative on that page is going to come from reserves, which we don't want, correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it depends on, you know, the overall quantum. Normally what happens is let's say, for example, supplemental sales, maybe we've got a positive variance there. Maybe we've got some emergencies or some COVID or some in-year overruns. So you're going to have some negative impacts there. So what you do is your overall position is, you know, is sort of put together and you say, okay, do I have an overall surplus or do I have an overall deficit? If you have an overall surplus, that's good. That goes to your reserves and that, you know, will finance some of your future years. If you have an overall deficit, you hope that you have reserves in place to fund the deficit, because if you don't, we're a little different than the provincial and the federal governments. We're not allowed to budget for deficits. We have to, you know, you have to balance your budget. So what will end up happening is if you have let's say for 2022 or any other year, we end up in a deficit position, there's no reserves to fund it. The next year, the first thing you have to do is you have to fund that deficit in the next year's budget.
Okay, just one last thing, Maria. Is that up to date where they always use the average home price in Thorold or a community?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it is up to date to a certain degree. MPAC, because of COVID, has not done the reassessment. So the values are still based on, I think it's, I forget what it is, 2016 values. 2016. So all of this, all these increases that we've been seeing in the market are not reflected in the valuation because MPAC has not completed their reassessment due to COVID.
So more than likely, it's going to be much higher. And you don't have to answer that. But anyway, I just wanted to say.
Well, Eventually, once MPAC does their reassessment, it will be higher, but right now, everybody's based on that same valuation date, okay? So even though, you know, maybe the home values have doubled or tripled from that point, everybody's on that same base. So there is no impact from the market fluctuation right now. What will happen is eventually MPAC will do a reassessment. You will see home prices reflect the market value, which will be the higher values that we're seeing now. However, what will happen is because your assessment base goes up, your tax rate will go down. So in theory, as long as your property goes up by the average amount, you should not see an impact in taxes from the reassessment. What ends up happening though is some properties go up higher than the average. In that case, you will see an impact. Your property may be increased lower than the average, and you will see less of an impact. But in general rule of thumb, you go up the average, you should not see an impact from the reassessment.
Okay, thank you for the explicit answer. I just wanted to make one final comment. You and the CAO mentioned about Thorold being a little bit below average. I think that's a good thing. It's only a couple of dollars, so I don't want to give everybody the false sense of security that we have so much room to tax, because being a little bit below is a good thing. Thank you. Thanks for your answers. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor DeRose. Any further questions? Councillor Neal, go ahead. And then Councillor Kenny.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Page 152, development charges regarding Rolling Meadows, $1.8 million. And page 35, which is in a deferral section regarding the Allenburg Community Center. And I want to make sure that when we look at the details of spending 1.8 million of development charges in Rolling Meadows, which is a good thing, is that we look at maybe either a new rec center or some sort of complex that will take care of the Allenburg Community Center, because in the page 35, there's about $300,000 worth of items that have to be done at the Allenburg Community Center, and we know it's an old building, and maybe we can kill two birds with one stone, is not having to pay the $300,000 to upgrade that particular building, and maybe sell that building and land for development of other things such as affordable housing, and have some funds to add to a recreation center in the Allenburg or in the Rolling Meadows subdivision that would cover both Allenburg, Thorold South, and the new development in Rolling Meadows. So I hope that we will be continuing to look at that, and a report will be coming forward to discuss what we are going to do with the $1.8 million regarding Rolling Meadows.
Thank you, Councillor Neal. Is there any comment for the, is that a question? There's no question there. I'm looking for questions for, on the presentation, but you can bring those things up when we go through the operating and deferral list, Councillor Neal.
Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Kenny.
Yeah, thank you very much, Maria, for your report. I just got just one question. In some of the spots you compared us to other places, in the reserves, you mentioned, I think it was 9.1 million that was available. How and you'd like to see it up to, I think you said 16, but I would just like to know, how is the city of Thorold's reserves doing in comparison to other cities as far as the reserves that are that you can use?
Through Mr. Mayor, I don't have the exact numbers, Councillor Kenny. However, you know, when you factor in that, you know, we do have the hydro reserve, I would say that the city of Thorold is probably in pretty good shape.
Councillor Kenny? Does that answer your question? Okay, any further questions before we move on? Okay, seeing none, again, thank you, Maria, for that presentation, and as recommended, we're going to go to the operating budget, and then we're gonna go to the preferred deferrals and then the capital budget, okay? So up first is operating budget, and so now, the floor is open for questions, and anything regarding the operating budget. Councillor Wilson.
Hi, Mr. Mayor, or thank you, Mr. Mayor, sorry. I'd like to put a motion on the floor to pass the operating budget the way it stands.
We have a motion to pass the operating budget the way it stands. I need a seconder, and then we'll open the floor for discussion on that. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Sentence, okay. Is there anyone want to speak to that? Seeing, oh, go ahead, Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's quite a few things I'd like to discuss in our operating budget. But I guess if a motion's been put on the floor to pass it, can we come back and try to add preferred deferred items, or?
Oh, yeah, this is, the preferred deferred is the next step after the operating, Council.
Okay, sorry.
Okay,
Oh, Mr. Mayor,
yeah,
my apologies. I did touch briefly in the presentation that there were some changes after the preparation of the budget, and I don't think I really highlighted that to council.
okay, I'll leave that.
If I could have an opportunity to just do so.
I will let you do that before we do the vote on that, because that needs to be addressed, absolutely.
Correct, yeah, sorry about that. So what we see is we see the arena revenue loss for January of about $47,000. We eliminate the need for a screener for that same period of about $21,000. We're going to fund that from reserves for $47,000. And then we've got the bump up. We've got an additional transit tax grant that we're going to increase by $19,810. So that brings us to the 2.74%. So sorry about that.
That is why from 285 it went to 274, correct, to the Director of Finance?
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Mayor.
And just a comment on COVID funding. We don't know if we're getting COVID funding, so obviously we can't budget for it, but I can tell you a collective effort, all the municipalities are working together and letting the Ontario government know how important that is to the municipalities, and that we need extended COVID funding to get through this time period. So we're hoping to get it, but we can't put it in the budget because we don't know if we're getting it, but we are working hard to try and get it, just so you know that. Anyway. Okay, I had a motion and a seconder, and Councillor DeRose, do you want to speak to the motion?
Yeah, I just, before the motion's voted on, are we able to, so we're able to come back and ask specific questions about some things on here?
We're past the operating budget, then there is another, there would be another opportunity at the end to do that, because we're...
There'll be another opportunity to ask questions about things that are on here.
I would say that's the procedure, am I correct? And I want to
Okay.
go through with the Director of Finance, am I correct when I say that? Isn't that the normal procedure?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, respectfully, I think normally we would kind of do the questions, and if somebody did want to bring something forward, that it would sort of go up on the,
Okay,
the old
we'll
days,
do
the
that,
flip chart. And then you always have an opportunity before the budget is passed to reconsider any of these items.
Okay,
Yeah,
so,
it's not a matter.
no, that's fine. So,
Yeah, I didn't
Councillor
want
Wilson,
anything to
are you
reconsider.
okay?
I just had to ask for some clarification on things. As long as
Yeah.
I can come back and ask for
No,
clarification.
can we do that now, that motion? Can we get these questions relating to specific questions? You're the mover of the motion. I just want to make sure you're okay with that we get these questions answered for you.
Yeah, that's no problem.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor DeRose.
Yeah, I'm on page 15. So if you look at page 15, expenditures, and again, it's under the Canada Summer Games. I just want to know the removal of 2 full-time arena staff. Okay, why is that it's like a savings to us? Because we're still deploying them to other parts of the city. So I don't understand that. If you can explain that. and the utilities, because I assumed we have to keep the white arena open and used.
Go
and
ahead.
in use.
Yeah, good questions.
Correct?
And I'll get our director to answer that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if you look at the page 14, you're right. The two additional, because the staff is being redeployed to parks, it is a reduction in the arena due to the movement to Canada Summer Games. And then what we do is we move them over to the parks. From a utility perspective, yes, you are keeping it open, but you don't have ice in there, and that's what's drawing a lot of the power is the creation of the ice in that arena. And I can stand to be corrected if Curtis or Jeff, if I've misspoken.
I think that's correct, but I will ask Jeff or Curtis if they want to comment on that.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. See, we're basically using one pad of ice, half the amount of water that we normally would use. So the reduction in utilities is quite significant.
Okay.
Okay, and where on there is the new, obviously we don't know the numbers yet, but is there any projections on there as far as, okay, we're removing 2 arena staff, but I can't imagine the amount of staff at the Walker site. Do we have any idea about that, Maria, or no? Not yet.
Mr. Mayor, as indicated, we have used the PwC numbers, which would have included the operating costs, including staffing.
Okay, but it's not on this page, or 14 or 15.
Through Mr. Mayor, the total, if you look, there's an incremental expense of $422,000 plus the $285 that you had last year. Those are your PwC numbers, along with the capital contribution and the financing costs.
So it's stating that the expenditures for the Canada Summer Games is 1.84%. So that's beefed up from last year's commitment of 200,000. Is that correct? That we committed?
Last year was 285 through you, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, okay. So is that why it's only 1.84? Because I assumed we were told before COVID that it was going to be about a 4% increase on the levy.
That's correct. It was phased financed in.
It is.
And then what happens next year?
Next year, what will happen is any deviation from the estimate, you reflect only the deviation from the estimate in future years' budgets. So if you have things like inflation that, if the PwC estimates are too high or too low, those will be reflected in next year's budget.
And does this get buried and just it gets buried as a base tax next year and the year after and so forth?
Through Mr. Mayor, I don't necessarily agree that it gets buried. It just becomes, there's an expenditure that becomes part of your base budget. Yeah. And from your base budget, then you add or subtract to reflect what your estimate is for the current year. No different than any other expense that we have.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further questions? Councillor Kenny. Go ahead, Councillor Kenny.
Yeah, page 25, I'd like to talk about the public relations specialist for $94,000. I'm not in favor of that. I don't know how others feel. I think it's a lot of money for a position that we don't need.
So what are you asking, Councillor?
Well, we're talking about this portion of the budget, are we not?
Yes, we are.
Well, I'm not. I'd like to remove it out of the budget.
I'm going to go back to the motion from Councillor Wilson. The motion was to pass the budget as is, and then I open the floor for questions because she was fine with the questions. But if you want to remove something, I'm going to go back to the original motion. Go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
Can I just make a comment on that?
Yeah.
If I may? So I did call and get clarification about that line item as well, because staff in 2 different departments did relocate their funding from part-time positions to this position. So though it says 95,000, it's actually only an increase of, or an addition of 20,000 to the budget because it's removed in those other departments. And I do believe that that position is very important. I mean, there's been so much that's been happening in the city over the past 4 years, from new developments to, staff making, having things investigated, council members being investigated, social media is out of control. I think we need a positive voice that can capture what we're doing as a council and how we're moving our city forward, that can actually show our residents what we're doing for them. I think it's very important. And all the other municipalities in our area do have multiple positions of this. So I don't think this is something that can be taken out. I think this is a reflection of the times that we're in. I mean, we've been on council, I think, for we're going on 3 out of 4 years on Zoom, for heaven's sakes. It's very important to have somebody that can make sure that we're getting information out to our community in a positive light and show them, what we're doing and keep us as a community. I saw a comment in a Thorold's Facebook community group, and people feeling that we're losing that small town feel. Now, I know we have a lot of development, but I think part of that is just not being in communication with people and not sharing all the good that we're doing. So I think this position is important as a counselor, I would love if there was stuff that was put out there that we could share with our constituents. I just think it's very important. So for $20,000, we added a swing last year for $50,000. I don't think adding $20,000 towards our professional to take care of this part of our city is much to ask. So,
thank you, Councillor Decker.
Okay. No, I'm not finished.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Kenny.
So it says 94,000 in the budget. If people were able to move money around to save money, so it only costs us 20,000, I'd like to see the 74,000 go towards something else. I don't want this position. If we're saving 74,000 in another area, that's great. But let's put it towards something. We've got some big projects here on the agenda, and I am not in favor of this position whatsoever. Thank you.
Go ahead. I had Councillor Decker with her hands up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree that we do need someone out there that can send some positive feedback to the community. Maria, can you clarify that it is only $20,000 to the budget?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if you look at page 14, down at the bottom, it says proposed community relations specialist replaces customer service rep and community service admin. So up at the top, under existing staffing, you see removal of 2021 part-time customer service rep and removal of 2021 part-time community services admin of $63,000. So that's where the number comes from. So we're eliminating the 2 positions of 63,000, and we're putting in, recommending the community relations specialist at 94. So you're at about $31,000 now.
Okay, and those wages, those wages include like your benefits and your insurances and stuff like that too, right, Maria?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor DeRose.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Originally, I was in support of Councillor Wilson's idea, and I have to agree with Councillor Kenny. I think there's just too many important needs that this is just another want, and I won't support that. I honestly agree with Councillor Kenny. We've got so many needs that we have to look at, and is this position a necessity? I don't think so, not in my eyes. I will not support that. I've changed my mind on it. I apologize, but that's how I feel. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak to that? Go ahead, Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I agree with Councillor Kenny. I don't think this position's, it may be needed, but it's not needed that bad at this time. We found a way to get rid of 2 part-time positions that obviously at one time we thought were important, but now we don't need, and we're going to move and transfer that $63,000 savings into another position. So at this point, I won't support that $94,500 position, and I would like to see that removed.
Okay. Anyone else want to speak to that? Councillor Sentence.
Did you call me, Mr. Mayor? I didn't hear. Sorry.
Yes, go ahead, Councillor Sentence. Sorry.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. At the 95,000 just straight out mark, I was iffy on that. But I think for what it does, and from what I'm told from staff that it does, that all of staff will be able to utilize this person that comes in for the 30,000. I think it is necessary, and I will support it. Again, when it was the 95 and just for it, I was iffy, but I will support it like this. Thank you.
Anyone else to speak to that? Go ahead, Councillor Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would imagine everybody gets this, but maybe not. But I have in front of me the City of St. Catharines, what's called the Garden City Current. It's the latest news from the City of St. Catharines. And I believe this position is the position in St. Catharines that looks after their current operations and whatever happens coming out of council and other things that happen in the city of Thorold from the city standpoint. The mayor has a message and city council news and that type of thing. So this is a difficult decision because I agree with Councillor Longo that the position is a good position, but can we afford it at the present moment? And I'm not sure whether we can afford it at the present moment. It would be great to have the city seeing what happens at city council and what happens around city council and other committees and organizations. But it's very difficult maybe we put it in for now and then we take a look at it later on in our meeting, either today or tomorrow, to see if we want to keep it in. So I will go along with putting it in for the present moment, but there are going to be pressures from our deferrals that are going to impact our budget going forward. So I don't mind it being put in at the present moment, but I think it should be looked at further on in our budget deliberations.
So let me, the Director of Finance there, Maria, based on our current, if we take the operating budget as is, but there's been a wholesome debate and it's pretty divided on what we want to do, we can remove that at the final end. Am I correct when I say that?
Yes, that's correct, Mr. Mayor. It is already in the budget. You wouldn't be putting it in. It's already there in the 2.74%. And then what will happen is you'll go through the rest of the sections of the deferrals. You may add some things, you may take things out. And then right before we finalize the budget, council will have an opportunity to kind of look at, here's the changes that we have, sorry.
No,
here's the changes that we have made, as we went along, and you will have an opportunity to re-examine any of the changes and vote on the changes yet again before you pass the budget.
Okay, because this seems to be one item that is going to require a second look based on what I can gather in the discussions we've had. And if that's the procedure that we follow, we leave it in for now, and then we go through the deferrals, and when we come back, if we decide, hey, this isn't, we got to get to where we got to go, this is something we want to take out, is council good with that? Go ahead, Councillor Longo.
I would be okay with that, Mr. Mayor, as long as we have the ability
Yeah.
going forward to remove it.
Okay, is Councillor DeRose, you good with that?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, as long as we can discuss it again, because I think we're straying from core services, and we're in overkill with all these positions and things we want to add and spend.
So what we're doing, No, so
Pardon?
you're aware, what we're doing, what the motion is to pass the operating budget. We've had a wholesome discussion on this position. We go through the deferral list, we do what we want to do, and we come back at the end and make that final decision. Are you good with that? I just want to make sure everybody's aware you'll have another chance at that, okay?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so the motion was to pass the operating budget. Go ahead, Councillor Longo, did you want to speak? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before you pass it, I do have some questions on the significant changes summary. So,
go ahead.
Okay, and my questions they're going to revert back to the Canada Summer Games. Just need a bit of clarity here. So, through you to the Director of Finance, you mentioned last year we spent $285,000. My understanding is $85,000 is for our capital contribution of $5.2 million. Is that correct?
Just a moment, I will call up the report. No, I don't believe that's correct.
Because I'll just, as you're looking, I'll make a comment, because last year I specifically remember that we added $200,000 to the budget for the Canada Summer Games.
Through Mr. Ray, the total in previous budgets, I think you had 85,000 the year before, and then last year you added 200, so that the contribution right now to Canada Summer Games prior to this, I can give you the page number. Just give me a moment. If you look on page 26, you'll see that the 2021 expenditures for the Canada Summer Games is 285.
Okay, thank you for that answer, but I have notes from last year, and I believe, and I could be wrong, we did spend 285 for Canada Summer Games, but my understanding is 85,000 is a debenture part to pay the capital portion, and the 200,000 was for a budget increase last year. And again, my question is, I know where the 85,000 went last year to pay our capital portion, but what did we do at the 200,000? Because I specifically remember saying we were going to tax the residents for something we didn't have to spend money on. So we held 200,000 for a year. How are we using that 200,000 from 2021?
Through Mr. Mayor, if I may answer the question, really what it is, Councillor Longo, is the entire project cost, and you're talking about what's the 200,000 for. It's for things, the project management fees, it's for legal fees as well. When we look at it from a accounting perspective, we are looking at including those costs in the Canada Summer Games overall cost. So it's not like we've taken, the 200,000 and we've paid off the, the legal fees and the project management fees. We've taken that amount. We said we've got to fund $5.3 million for the Canada Summer Games project. And those amounts are going to pay down the overall capital portion. We have capitalized those costs. We have not expensed those costs. So what you had was 85,000 in 2020. You had an additional 200,000 in 2021, which is the 285. And now you've got the balance of the contribution. To your earlier question of, was the 80, I forget what your question was, but in terms of the financing costs, it is roughly 87,000 is financing costs. And then for your, I don't know if your question was life cycle, but life cycle and the management fees were about $312,000 based on PwC.
Okay, I know there's a lot of numbers here, and I'm just trying to wrap my head around this. So from the PWC numbers, I believe, and I think this is accurate, our portion for the operational losses as estimated, okay, is $253,000 in year one.
Correct?
Then there's another payment we need to make annually, and that is, it's referred to different ways, an asset renewal or a life cycle cost, which basically pays to keep the building at a certain level.
Right.
Based on the current, and I'm using the current projected build cost of 95 million, I've got an annual amount of 356,000. So my number's about 600,000 a year, give or take, estimated, that we are committing to this facility this year. I just want to make sure I have my numbers close to right.
Again, there are some items that you really didn't mention, respectfully, Councillor Longo. There are some changes to our budget that were identified as, loss of ice time, reduction in staff, reduction in utilities. There is a provision for subsidy for unsold ice that we had estimated at about $55,000. So that's how we develop the total number that we are projecting. As indicated, there may be positive variances that we are not cherry picking and making ad hoc changes to any of the numbers. So, your amount for the life cycle, I guess perhaps that might go up. But what we don't know is there a corresponding reduction on somewhere else. So on that basis, and this is, frankly, this is a similar approach that I understand St. Catharines took with their budget, is they used the PWC numbers because we don't have other numbers. So those are the best estimates that we have. Could the life cycle be higher based on your assumptions that, the cost was higher? Sure. Could some of the expenditure numbers that PWC, if you have someone with a little bit more experience, like an independent operator, could there be savings that they may garner from that PWC didn't consider? Sure. Could there be issues with, with rentals? Sure. But we just don't know. So in the absence of not knowing, we have to go with the only numbers that we have, which is the PWC numbers.
Fair enough, and I do appreciate that answer. I'm just trying to get a bit of clarity because, as you say, there's a lot of different factors here. And just back to that, and again, you probably can't answer it, but I'm just curious if maybe you do know an answer. My understanding is we need to purchase ice time up front. Is that budgeted for here, or is that not an issue? How do we do that with a facility like this?
Well, through you, Mr. Mayor, I think it's more of a cash flow issue at that point. I guess what we're hoping, we've not seen the final because an independent operator is still sort of being, they're still going, the region and the partners are still going through the process. But certainly what our preference would be from a finance perspective is that the independent operator is charged with, handling the rentals, and that the city would then be responsible for any shortfall where they can't rent things out. Do we know that that's the way it's going to go? No, I don't at this point. I would suspect that, perhaps in the early months as we're starting to get going, we may have to cash flow up front at that point. But certainly our long-term preference would be is to let the independent operator actually handle the rentals. So I can't give you a 100% black and white answer on that, Councillor Longo.
Yes, thank you. And again, I respect your answers. I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I'm just trying to get a bit of clarity to see if maybe you do have some of these answers. If I could, and I knew I saw this somewhere, if I could refer you to page 95 of the budget binder. And this is where through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Director of Finance, this is where I'm trying to understand that 285 from last year. And this is, my understanding is it's 85,000 to pay for our capital portion, which we've financed internally for 23 years. So the other 200,000 from last year was not for capital costs and legal fees and so on. It was to be directed towards the Canada Games operational loss and asset renewal. So my question is, since we taxed people last year for it and we held it back, and now we're applying it for 2022, what happens in 2023? Do we have another $200,000 increase for the project? And if you need to look into this to bring an answer for tomorrow, I'm fine with that. I don't want to put you on the spot here, but I'm just trying to understand the mechanics of that using that 200,000 last year, because through you, Mr. Mayor, to Director of Finance, you mentioned something earlier about burdening future budgets. And that's what I believe we did last year when we put a $200,000 levy on. So I'm going to leave it at that, Mr. Mayor. Maybe the Director of Finance can look into that and.
Sure.
Go ahead,
Sure.
Maria.
Mr. Mayor, we'll come back. I honestly, I think there's an error on page 95, but we'll come back tomorrow night with the update.
Okay, that's great. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you. Okay. Okay, we have a motion on the floor, a mover and a seconder, that we accept the operating budget. All those in favor? Opposed, that is carried. Okay, so now we're gonna move on to preferred deferrals. And, this is where you can bring up a project or talk about something and see if we're adding it. And, I'll start with Councillor Longo has his hand up. Go ahead, Councillor Longo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Preferred deferrals. I'd like to start with the Operations Center.
Yep.
And I'd like to add that project to the budget.
Yeah.
My reasoning will be because, and you'll remember this, Mr. Mayor, from the last term of council, I brought this forward. I believe it was a 2017 budget meeting. Could be a year off. But we budgeted for the Operations Center renewal. At that time, I felt it was long overdue. It was a terrible working environment for our staff, our operations staff. And believe me, 5 years later, it's even worse. This is a project we need to move forward. I know council may not want to do it. I'm not sure, but I believe we need to bite the bullet. This is a tough one. And I would like to,
You'd like to bring it
start
forward.
by adding that.
Can I get a seconder for that? I have Councillor Decker. Okay. Is there any discussion on that? Go ahead, Councillor DeRose. Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councillor Longo 100%. That would have been my first choice to add.
Okay.
And it is placed at #1 priority, so I think it's long overdue. And we, our workers, city workers and our community deserve that level of service, and the staff deserves that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to speak to that? Go ahead, Councillor Hanley.
No, I'll support this motion also to put it as part of the 2022 capital project budget.
Thank you. Councillor Sentence.
I couldn't agree more. There's a couple things on here that are long overdue, and I think that's one of them. So I'll support that.
Anyone else to speak to that? We got a mover, Councillor Longo, and a seconder, Councillor Decker, to add the Operations Center from the deferral list. Councillor Wilson, did you want to speak to that?
Yes, and I'm not sure if I can do this, but I guess my question was why this was #1. And I was surprised to see the fire station being #3. And I maybe should have asked Maria in her presentation, but I'm just not sure if we're like picking one or if everybody wants to do both. So I'm asking the question now, I guess.
This was number one, but I can ask staff to, and I know, as Councillor Longo mentioned, that this was a project that we put forward last term of council, early in that term, if I'm not mistaken. But anyways, who wants to speak to that? Our CAO will.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as you know that we have a strategic plan in place, and that is council's strategic plan, they have approved it. And there are 4 pillars to that strategic plan. And under the pillar of responsible community growth and infrastructure planning, build and sustain infrastructure that generates civic pride. So in every of these pillars, you have 4 tiers. The tier 1 means that's the most important priority for council, and under that, the first one is develop a plan and funding strategy for a new operations center. So that's where it comes from. And then as Ms. Morrow in her presentation, she mentioned she has also identified some other projects like Broderick Avenue and some other projects. They are tier 2 projects in the strat plan. And then what she mentioned in her presentation that the develop and plan and funding strategy for a new fire headquarters and emergency operations center is tier 3. Doesn't mean that we are saying that from staff perspective, the reason why we have put in the preferred deferred items, because we think both of these projects are important. They have been long overdue. And so that is the reason from staff perspective, the positions and these projects that we have put in the preferred deferred, from staff perspective, we think that they are important for council's consideration. Thank you.
Councillor Wilson, did you want to add any more to that?
No, that's okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Councillor Longo, did you want to speak again to that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if everybody's done, I do have a question to the Director of Finance on this, because although we have it in our budget book here, if people are listening or watching, or they may want to know what the impact is and how this would be financed and paid for. So wonder if I can get an explanation on the Operations Center.
Absolutely. Maria, could you please go through that for
Sure.
people?
Mr. Mayor, the Operations Center is estimated at a cost of $8.5 million. We can use $810,000 in current development charge funding. We can also use $1.241 million in future development charge funding. What we've done is we've collapsed the design costs along with this. Because part of the project is housed, our water and sewer staff is housed out of that building, we can use water and sewer reserves towards that of about $3 million. And that leaves about $3.7 million roughly to finance. At that level, we likely will finance it internally over 10 years. We already have, as Councillor Longo indicated, this project has been kicking around for a long time, and we have made some provisions that are already in the budget of $122,000 in funding. So what we're left with is $88,483 that would hit the levy, which represents a 0.51% impact.
Is that good, Councillor Longo?
Yeah, that's great. I just want to give credit to Director of Finance for creatively using every opportunity we can to get this project done. So I think that's money well spent. Thank you.
As well as that, because of us being prepared on this project, we can also apply for any funding opportunities that come up as well. Councillor DeRose, did you want to speak to the operations?
Yeah, I was going to reiterate what Councillor Longo just said. Great work on that, Maria. And I just wanted to ask you, does that mean next year? Does that mean every year it's going to be around 80 to 90,000 for the next 10 years?
For the next 10 years, that's correct.
Okay, I think it's an excellent investment. Thank you.
But that once it's ingrained in the budget, Councillor DeRose, it's ingrained in the budget. You're not raising it every year on top of that. Okay.
Correct. So, and that's again, that's over and above the 122,000 that's been in there for a number of years.
Yeah.
Okay.
I seen Councillor Hanley. Did you want to speak on that, Councillor Hanley?
No, just in that I would support Councilor Longo's motion in regards to pulling that from the deferral item and putting it into the
Okay,
2022 capital projects.
so we have a mover, Councillor Longo, seconder, Councillor Decker, that we add the Operations Center to the budget. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. So we add that. And we move on now. Councillor Longo, you're still up. Go ahead.
This will be my last one, I think, Mr. Mayor. Deferred priority number 2, the fire station. This is, in my mind, very similar to the Operations Center. We have current staff members who unfortunately work in substandard conditions. We saw the pictures of the fire department in a presentation a month or so ago. Those aren't made up. I've done tours of the fire station. It's terrible. We have firefighters who have to live there. They sleep there when they're on duty, when they're able to. It's terrible, those conditions. I wouldn't be surprised if we have fire code violations at our fire hall. So nobody probably wants to spend this kind of money, but it has to be done. Why wait till next year? This is definitely, in my mind, a need. It's not a want. We need this. Every single taxpayer in Thorold will benefit from better fire services, and that's what we'll get with this this location, this building, and the way it's designed for both our full-time and part-time firefighters. So I'd like to put this one on the floor, and I'll let others discuss it. And if so be it. Maybe Director of Finance first could explain how this one would be funded if we decide to go forward.
Okay, so you're going to move it. I had Councillor Sentence. You're going to second it, Councillor Sentence. Is that correct? Okay, so we got that motion. Before I open the floor for discussion, I'll let our Director of Finance go through that, and then I'll open the floor for further questioning. Okay, go ahead. As far as Maria, if you want to speak to this.
Sure. Fire Station 1, total cost is $12.87 million. The current development charges that we could use is $3.4 million. Future development charges of $6.172. Council had previously decided that any proceeds from Station 1 could be applied to this. Here we don't have a number. We've just estimated it at $500,000. Hopefully it would be higher, but I don't know. That leaves us with capital funding of $4,855,000 required, which is a levy impact to fund over the 10 years of over the 25 years of $278,000 for a levy impact of 1.61%.
Okay, now speakers to that. Go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
Sorry, did you call me Mr. Mayor?
Yes, go ahead, Councillor.
Okay, sorry, it's glitching in and
someone
out for
said
me
they're
here.
having trouble with my mic, but I don't know why it's on, but.
Oh, maybe it is your mic. I thought it was me. I thought my hearing.
The clerk told me it's not loud, but it's the same mic I use all the time, so I can't tell you why that is.
Oh, okay. Well, yes, I do remember all the pictures. That sink still haunts me to this day. I do believe we need to make this change. I mean, we purchased the land. We have the plan for what to build. I think it's a definite need in our community. My question, I guess, would be to Maria. I believe in our discussions before, you said there are some possibilities of grants that we might be able to pay or apply for that might obviously reduce this. And if so, then this increase would then go to reserves, I'm assuming, right? If we ended up not needing the amount budgeted for?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, when you have development charge funding for any of the projects, if you receive any grants, they come off the development charge total first. So The only way you would get a benefit to the city levy is if you recoup more in grants than the development charges that we're proposing to use. So for the fire station, you're looking at roughly $7.5 million. So if we could garner a grant in excess of $7.5 million, that excess portion could be used to reduce the levy requirements. If you receive a grant up to that point, it really only serves to reduce the DCs, and it does not impact on the amount the city can contribute or has to contribute. And that's the same thing with the operations center.
So Maria, though, if you look at the numbers, it's actually would be more beneficial to get funding for the operations center, correct?
Through Mr. Mayor, the operations center, the DC funding is 2.5.
Yeah. So hopefully
it's not 2.5.
No.
It's going to be 8:30. My brain stops functioning. Sorry. 8:10 plus 1.41. Yeah, about 2 million.
1.2.
Yeah.
2.05.
Well, I can tell you this: we will try and get every ounce.
So if you could get 2 million, in excess of 2 million on the operations center in grant funding, then certainly that would be more of a beneficial, and likely we'd have more of a chance of gaining a little bit in excess of $2 million as opposed to $7.5 million in the fire station.
And the beauty is, once we can get these ingrained in the budget, we can go after funding. And there are, I met already with Vance Badaway last week, and we have a meeting next week set up with MPP Jeff Birch. So we will pursue every avenue to try and get additional funding. But based on the budget, we have to go based on these numbers, so. Is that, are you, any further questions, Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, so I guess, let's say you got funding, but not beyond the 7 million. So it went back to the developmental charges, and then that money in the developmental charge still has to go towards fire services. Is that correct?
Through Mr. Mayor, yes, it would have to. So in 2024, we'll do our next development charge background study. And what we'll do is we'll look at what are the growth-related fire projects. And if, say, for example, we got $7 million in grants for the fire station that we did not have to use development charges for, you would look at your total growth projects for the upcoming period, but you would now have a reserve balance for your fire DCs that would reduce the amount of DCs that you need to collect. So what it would mean is that it would reduce the quantum of the development charge on a go-forward basis. And you're right, it can only be used for fire. So you couldn't say, gee, I've got $7.5 million in fire, and I'd like to build a park with it or something. It has to stay within that fire realm.
Okay.
Perfect, thank you.
Councillor Kenny, and then Councillor Neal. I'll work our way around. Don't worry, everyone will get a chance.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Longo
on. Councillor Kenny, you dropped out on us.
Yeah, losing my video. Anyway, I agree with Councillor Longo on this. I would just like to ask Maria, before if this is passed, before we go to any other deferrals, I'd like to know where the levy is sitting, the percentage, if these two projects were put in. That's all.
Okay, and that's fine. And I had Councillor Neal's had his hand up.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I agree with what is going around the table. I'm sure pretty well everybody will agree that we need a new fire station. When I brought back, Trenton built a new fire station about 4 years ago now, and I took pictures, brought them back, and basically it's a similar type of building that's going to be put up here. And going in there, I do go in fairly often to the #1 fire station, and it's just terrible. I wouldn't work in it. I'm surprised that they haven't made some grievances against the city for the working conditions that are there. So I'm all for moving forward and putting it in the budget process.
Thank you, Councillor Neal. Councillor Sentence.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councillor Longo and everyone else as well. This is a need, not a want. It's horrible working conditions. Decontamination is almost impossible. Having separate rooms for the girls and the boys and where they sleep and everything like this. This is a need, and I will support this fully. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hanley. Go ahead, Councillor Hanley, and then Councillor DeRose will be after that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I echo everybody else sentiments and that stuff too. The hall is deplorable, no doubt about it. I've done a tour of it too. I'm sure we all have. We've seen it. And, you know, I'm a joint health and safety committee sitting member, and I know that if my working brothers and sisters were living in those type of deplorable conditions, that we would address it. And not only that, you know what? I think we've been talking about this for about 20 years, about buying land, build a new station, number one, and it's got pushed off going on 2 decades, and I think it's about time. We've met the challenge. It's there. As Councilor Longo said, it's going to serve all taxpayers throughout, and it's a need. It's definitely a need in the municipality, and it'll be a showcase place, no doubt about it. We're developing more and more. It's obviously with the discussions tonight, so the need is growing greater by the day, and it's been far too long, so I support it fully.
Thank you, Councillor Hanley. Councillor DeRose.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I agree 100% with Councilor Longo's motion or request. Also, the silver lining in the cloud, I think that property value of the fire station number 1, that can change the whole dynamics of downtown. And I think we will get way above 500,000 for that property. So that'll help incur a little more help in paying it off. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Anyone else to speak to that? Councillor Decker, go ahead.
Hello, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I echo everyone's sentiments. I'm really happy to see this come to the table. And I do agree with everyone. It's a need, not a want. So that's awesome. And Councillor Kenny asked my question too. I just wanted to see where our levy was at now, but that's awesome.
2.1
Thank
plus
you.
2.7.
Okay, so any further speakers? I had a mover, Councillor Longo, and I had a seconder, was Councillor Sentence. Did you want to speak again, Councillor Longo?
I just want to, as Councillor Kenny and Councillor Decker said, I just wonder if, before we vote, the Director of Finance can kind of update what this would do to the levy.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll turn that over to Councillor, to our Director of Finance.
Oh, no thanks, Mr. Mayor. We're at 4.86%.
What are we, sorry?
4.86%.
Okay, 4.86. Now, there's something else that I can bring up I know Maria won't like this, but we could look at an option of using some reserves to lower the impact, but that would again be a decision of council and not a decision that you have to make right now. We can make it at the time when we're looking at the final package. Did you want to speak any more, Councillor Longo?
No.
Okay. Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, so we know based on everything we've done so far, we're at 4.86. There are opportunities, and that's something we can discuss as we move forward. Go ahead, Councillor Hanley.
Moving on to the deferral list.
We're still on the deferral list, Councillor Hanley, absolutely.
Well, seeing that the third
deferral.
biggest project there is the Port Robinson East Echo Park at 4.3 million, and that's going to be phased in over years. And again,
is that
you
on
know,
the preferred
speaking
deferral?
tonight that the first step may be not that much all inclusive of the 4.3 million. So I'd like to put that on the Port Robinson East Eco Park.
Is that
if I could, please deferral and put it on to the budget. I'd like to hear other councillors mind frames on that, and let's get the project rolling, because we all know you push it off 1 year, it gets pushed off 2, 3. It only puts a year behind. We got the, as we already know through the report, the Burnside report, we have to do this in stages. And it's gonna be a prolonged project that'll probably last in through the next term of council before it comes to full fruition. So I'd like to see it added to the 2022 budget in its entirety.
Go ahead, Councillor Wilson. That's a mover, Councillor Hanley. Is there a seconder for that so we can open discussion? Councillor,
Can I second it just so we can open the discussion?
I got Councillor Sentence, yeah, and then we'll open discussion, okay? So I got a mover, Councillor Hanley, seconder, Councillor Sentence, regarding the Port Robinson Bridge to move on to the budget list, and now we'll open discussion. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Maria. I'm not sure if I missed it, Maria, but I did see the fire station and the operations center, what that impact for the levy would be on page 30, but I didn't see that for this, for the Port Robinson East Park.
Through Mr. Mayor, it is on page 34. But as a presenter indicated, what was in here was the entire value of the project of $4.3 million, which would equate to $500,000 in a levy impact. If council is going to consider phasing the project, you may wish to, I don't know if staff's able to provide, certainly if we're talking $200,000 in phase one, that could be accommodated in a reserve. But if you're talking, millions, then, I think we do need to set something aside. And again, I don't know what the phasing looks like.
We've asked for a staff report to come back, and if there's a phasing a thing, and the first part is a couple of $100,000, and I don't know, nobody knows, that could be done out of reserves and a decision made at that time, right? Am I correct, is what you're saying?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Hanley, did you want to speak to that? Because I know you had your hand up about the
Mr. Mayor, actually, when we were talking about it prior, I was wanting to suggest an amount of $250,000 for phase one.
Yeah, but we don't know what the
Director of
cost.
Finance mentioned $200,000, but that was my intention, because I was thinking, okay, to build nesting boxes, to do the mediation work for the turtles. I think our biggest expenditure here is going to be on the actual structure, the demolition of the older structure, the refurbishing of the newer structure. This would be a minimum of those costs. So through you, Mr. Mayor, to the appropriate staff member, if you could ask for me, please.
Yeah.
Could we accommodate the $250,000, Maria? That would be a suggestion.
Through Mr. Mayor, can we come back tomorrow night and I'll look for some reserve funding source?
Yes.
Agreeable.
You're good with that, Councillor Hanley? So that's going to be deferred to tomorrow evening. Maria's going to look at that, and also maybe Jeff could put some input, and let's see how we could do it. If we could do it out of reserves, we'll see tomorrow. We're at 8:30. Does anyone want to continue, or are we stopping for tonight? I leave it in your capable hands. Go ahead, Councillor Neal.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to bring one forward, and I think it shouldn't be too long. Page 39.
Okay, we'll allow you to do that, and then I'll ask council if that's good for tonight. And if you want to keep going, I have no problem keep going, but it's at the will of council. Okay.
And the item is the Lake Gibson Corridor Master Plan. And I talked about this recently, the Lake Gibson Corridor, and it was put to planning to take a look at it, and planning has asked me to bring it forward because it's a specialized project. And I have a motion here that Lake Gibson, the $150,000 Lake Gibson Corridor Master Plan be funded from the Municipal Land and Building Reserve in the amount of the $150,000.
You have a seconder? Councillor Decker. I can tell you this, if you remember from the last meeting, we've actually applied for funding for this. You're aware of that. Are you aware of that, Councillor Neal?
No, I'm not.
we apply, am I correct, Maria, that was part of or the clerk can, give me the details by positive last meeting, that was one of the things that we, did, we put in 2 fundings, and was that one of them?
I'm sorry, what was the project?
The Lake Gibson Corridor Master Plan, I thought that's one of the things we've applied.
Not under the last grant. I don't know if that was done maybe in 2021.
No, there was 2 that come forward in the last council meeting.
I don't think that was one of them, not the Lake Gibson.
I thought it was, can you?
Let me double check though, I'll double check.
She'll double check that, but.
Thank you.
So Counselor, you had a motion, who seconded that? I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I got.
Counselor Decker, second.
Counselor Decker. Okay, and can you go read it again so everybody can be clear here?
The $150,000 Lake Gibson Corridor Master Plan be funded from the Municipal Land and Building Reserve.
Okay. So I got a mover and a seconder, and now open the floor for discussion. Counselor Longo, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the Director of Finance, would this be a suitable use of the reserve that's been quoted?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, I believe we'd be okay using that.
Okay, and just so everybody's clear, using reserve will have no levy impact, right? You'll just draw down the reserve?
That's correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
Someone else had their hand up, and did I?
He answered my question, Mr. Mayor. Or he asked my question. Thank you.
Thank you. And the clerks, yeah, go ahead.
It's not for a master plan, it was for the reservoir stormwater management study. So
Oh,
it
the
wasn't-
stormwater management
Yeah.
study we put in for Counselor Neal. Okay,
Yep, thank you.
so that's another thing, but anyway, just so you know, we did put in for a grant for the stormwater management study, okay? Okay, so that's on the floor to add that. All in favor? Opposed, that's carried. Okay, so does anyone, do you want to go further, or you want to stop tonight and come back tomorrow? Let me get some feedback from council here. Councilor Wilson.
I'd be okay with going till 9.
You
That's
wanna-
helpful.
Is everybody good to go till 9 o'clock? All those in favor? Opposed, that's carried, so we'll go for another 25 minutes, okay? We're on the preferred deferral list. Do we have any more additions? Counselor Decker?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't know if it can come to the budget, but Broderick, is there any way we can direct staff to seek sources of funding for that project to phase it in the future dated? How does that work with Broderick?
I'll let Jeff Holman speak to that.
Thank you.
Jeff, are you there?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we took a report to council late last year that talked about phasing Broderick to make it a little bit more affordable for us. I'll double check with Sean, he can confirm this, but the project is, as we call it, shovel ready. It might be a good candidate to get to put out there for infrastructure funding if we can afford to do it. But you know, like St. David's Road, this is a project that we've been pushing back. The residents on that street are keen to get some work done there. It's not costing us a lot of money in terms of interim maintenance, but at some point in time, we're going to need to put in a proper storm drainage system in there to resolve some of the issues. So I can't really tell you that it's more important than the other projects that you're considering tonight, but it is certainly at the top of the list.
Can we, I think what she's looking for is opportunities for funding, and we're always looking for funding on that side for roads with St. David's and Broderick. Is that something that we're constantly looking for, an envelope there where we could submit?
Yeah, I'm not aware of any programs that, I mean, this would fit into some of the infrastructure streams that were made available last year and the year before that, but we weren't in a position to apply for them. We would be this year, but I don't have a handle on what programs might be available, Mr. Mayor.
We will contact our MPP and our MP. In fact, we're meeting with them. The other thing is I've been pushing hard, and I know Vance is pushing hard again to make that community building fund, which used to be the old gas tax fund. We're working hard to try and get that doubling of that, not only for this year, but to be a permanent doubling. And hopefully something will come of that, because that could go a long way to help us. Anyways.
Yeah, I'd love to see it come to the table. I know that we're pretty high up there on the levy, so I'm just trying to find a way to get some funding so it's not a forgotten road. I know it's in desperate need of being repaired, and so I'm just trying to
I agree. It's definitely a project that we need to work hard to, not only to try and move forward, but to look at avenues or envelopes for funding, Councillor Decker.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Neal. You're busy tonight, Councillor Neal.
We're all busy tonight. It's been a good night, actually. Page 34, I did bring forward the Battle Beechwood Park at the corner of Davis Road and Old Stone Road, and council passed that we create a park at the corner there from the amount that, from the land that the developer has to give to the city. And there's $25,000 amount in there for design part of that park. And what I would like to do is to put a motion forward to put that in the budget process at least. And from my perspective, maybe we could go after the developer to maybe put some funding into this particular park as part of a funding issue. So I move that we use the $25,000 to design and establish a Battle of Beechwood Park.
And it is on page, give me the page again, please.
It's 34.
And it is for 25,000.
Yeah, it's design parking feature at Old Stone Road and Davis Road, $25,000.
Okay, Maria, do you want to speak to that? Well, first of all, I got to move her. Councillor Neal's her seconder for that. Motion, Councillor Sentence. Okay, and Maria, can you speak to that? And then maybe Curtis can speak to it as well.
Well, through you, Mr. Mayor, if I understand Councillor Neal correctly, the funding source would be developer funding as opposed to city funding?
That is correct.
Okay.
So it will not impact the levy. You just want to make sure it's captured and it's there so that we can move. Is that what you're looking for, Councillor Neal?
That's what I'm looking for.
Okay. Anyone else want to speak to that?
I'm sorry, can you just clarify? So the 25,000 wouldn't
not
go
on
on
the
the levy? We would ask the builder to give that money?
That's correct.
That's correct. That's what I understand. Yes. Am I correct when I say that, Maria?
So should we be voting on that now, or shouldn't that be
Well, we just
another
wanted to-
separate council motion?
We want to
Not
move
in
it
the
in.
budget.
We just he wants it captured, okay? Councillor DeRose.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, can I just get a clarification? Is this just for a design? Do we have the cost after the fact that'll be incurred by the city? Thank you.
That's my understanding. Go ahead, Councillor Neal, and then.
Yeah, at the moment it's for the design, but I think in talks with the developer, we can touch base with him on maybe funding other parts of that park in the future.
what kind of park is this gonna be?
It's a Battle Beechwood, it's the battle site.
It's on
That's the
the,
Battle of the War of 1812.
yeah, on
That
the,
is the site.
I understand the historical significance, but it's kind of an obscure place and out of the way. I
Is
just,
it?
I don't know if it'll be used.
If you go down Thurlstone Road and look a block away, you'll see 3 flags flying. It's pretty, and it just needs some identification as far as, or signage as far as identifying where it is.
I think that's a part of a bigger picture too, to, when they're doing the tour of all the sites. Am I correct, Councillor Neal, as they move forward on those historic tours?
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah, okay. So that's just
Thank
to
you.
just to capture it and move it in. Is my correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you want to speak to that, Councillor Sentence?
I just want to make sure that it's clear that there's nothing on the levy here. It's just
No,
to
it's
put it in
nothing
there.
on-
So that's
nothing-
good.
Nothing.
I'm good.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. I got one little item that I talked to the Director of Finance about. I can think we can do it without impacting the levy, is I want to ask council that if we can get direction to extend the patio to all our restaurants for this summer, you know, the licensing fees on the patio, as we move forward to help all our restaurants again this summer. It's Maria, do you have a number on that? I know it's not significant.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I did circle back to planning, and they indicate that there really would be no impact because I don't think they budgeted anything for it anyway.
So do we need to include it or not include it? Or should we capture it?
Yeah, we'll just put it on as an item, patio fee elimination, and so that it's captured, but there won't be an impact. There won't be a cost.
Is everybody good with that? Go ahead, Councillor Longo, did you want to speak to
I was
that?
just going to say I'd second it, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Longo, does someone want to bring that forward so I don't have to leave the chair? Do you want to bring it forward, Councillor Decker, and seconder, Councillor Longo? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay. Anything else here? Go ahead, Councillor Decker, and then Councillor Wilson, you'll be next after that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That proposed part-time support position for community services, not that I want to bring it to budget, but I'm just wondering, especially because we don't know with COVID how it's going to affect if we're going to host Canada Day, and we have the 13 for 30 event that's going to take place in August, and to help support our community services department. Could we perhaps use when we're hiring the students to help in that area there? Can maybe Curtis answer that for me, or does it have to come to the budget if we can use?
I'll get Curtis. Is Curtis, Curtis, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, sorry, I'm here, Mr. Mayor. Through you, so the $25,000 that I believe the councillor is referring to was for a part-time staff allocation to assist with events, essentially. So Canada Day, Easter egg hunt, those sort of functions that we do throughout the year, that part-time element would be able to assist, because what we've seen over the last couple of years is a significant decline in volunteerism. So this would assure that we actually have staff on site to assist in the event. And what it would be is the volunteers, as grateful as we are, would be the icing on the cake, as opposed to simply what we rely on wholesomely. It would give us the ability to do additional events through the year, such as we did before with yoga in the park, and like it was brought up, the Canada Day, those sort of events.
Anyone?
So could we utilize a student that we hire for the summer to assist in that area?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we're stretched pretty thin with all the parks that we have on the roster right now, with the amount of baseball fields. So The other element is that the students cannot do more than 40 hours a week. So it would be a tough go for us to be able to manage that schedule because we do day shifts, afternoons, and weekends with the staff that we have. So it would be a difficult position for the students to be in.
How much impact, Marie, would that have on our levy? Because I know that we are having difficulty getting volunteers to help with our events. And that we are really scarce in this area, and we don't, I guess, it's not that we have to hire that person right now, but perhaps down the road, if we know that, you know, they can be okay with the COVID, that we can go ahead and host all these events, because we are having problems getting people to help us with the events that we're hosting in the city.
Through you, Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
if I look at the estimate that was provided on page 34, it's a proposed part-time support for community services of $15,600. I'm not sure if that is a student rate or an actual part-time rate. Perhaps Curtis could shed some light on that, but you know, that was the request, was $15,600.
I'd like to bring it forward then. I've just, Curtis, I'm not sure what, like, if we bring it forward, but we don't know if we're gonna need that position yet, right?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. Based on the events that we don't know that we can have, it would be a sort of a shot in the dark based on COVID restrictions. There could be limitations, yes.
You want to bring that forward?
Yep.
Is there a seconder? Counselor Sentence? Speakers to that? Limited, we're speaking to that item. Go ahead, Counselor DeRose.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think, as Councillor Decker said, due to COVID, we can't be guaranteed these are going to go off. So I would just leave it. And I think we can find money somewhere if necessary down the road. That's just my opinion. I won't support this. Thank you.
So what you're saying is if we do need the position after we come out, it would have to be a request for reserves, I would think then. Am I right, Maria?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Are you?
Yeah, I just don't think taxpayers should be paying something for that might not happen. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I would be good if it could come out of reserves down the road if everything goes according to plan. I know right now it's not, so I don't want that person right now.
Okay.
I'd like it for, I guess, a future, should.
So why don't you request that if that position's needed, staff come back with a report at that point in time? Are you good? Are you okay with that?
Yep, I'm good with that. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Neil, did you want to speak to that as well?
Yes, I did, because I've been thinking about this, because I get the Canada Games volunteer thing every couple of weeks, wanting to have volunteers. And I say to myself, well, I think the city's putting on a volunteer event for the Canada Games for Manitoba. I haven't heard anything about it at all, but I'm sure that we're going to need lots of volunteers for that, and that. So I'm not sure whether it should be brought up tonight, but I think because of what we just are talking about, volunteerism is, where do we stand as far as volunteers for the Canada Games, and where do we stand with putting on the event? I think there's $50,000, I believe, in the budget.
That's
not mistaken, for that purpose. Maybe a comment from Curtis.
Special Events Committee and our staff's been working, but I'll let Curtis speak to that.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. So that's correct. So there's a separate budget for that specific event, that if additional support staff are needed, we'll use that funding for that purpose as well. And then also the Canada Summer Games would be supplying us volunteers as well for that event.
But I think that this whole discussion on volunteerism and not having enough bodies and that needs a bigger discussion, because it is a big issue. And the other thing, and I've often thought about, if we can work some sort of MOU with the university or the college that has people in those type of programs, that we might be able to to partner up like we do on some other things, it's something I think we should be looking. I'm not saying it's going to be free help, but you know, it might be something that makes it a win-win for both parties. Councillor
Through you,
Sutton?
Mr. Mayor, the Special Events Committee is looking into that with the schools and stuff, but trust me, we've been having a very difficult time getting volunteers to help us with events that are happening in the city. So that's why this position would be really good. If we can do what you mentioned earlier, that, you know, if it comes to fruition down the road, then if we have funding for it, then that would be great. I would put it on hold for now then if I know that that's a possibility, maybe, you know, 2 or 3 months down the road,
That's a
depending on what happens with COVID, right?
That's a point well taken. Okay, Councillor Sentence?
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Decker about the position. I like the idea, though, of waiting to see what we need and when we need it. That's a good compromise, because there's other things. There's a Santa Claus parade that's always in jeopardy. We don't know what's going on. If we could utilize this person, you know, all year, that would be fantastic. But I like this idea of getting it, but waiting to see what we need.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor DeRose?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I like the idea of trying to involve university students, but we can also tie in local high school students, maybe make it a co-op situation where they'd get a half a credit or something. The only problem is, once again, when I tried to do that this past year with Snow Buddies, due to COVID, they wouldn't commit any, the school boards wouldn't commit to it. So just, once again, it's a great idea, possibly for next year, as hearing today that hopefully this Omicron will be over peak by the end of the year. And but it is a good way going forward to utilize our local students in college and university, but also in high schools. Thank you.
Point well taken. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. Is everybody good with that? We'll move forward. If we're going to see these events come forward, Curtis can bring a staff report to council. Is that good? Everybody's good with that?
That's great.
Okay, and I had Councillor Wilson that had her hand up. So you're up next, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to bring forward or ask questions about the Allenburg Community Center. I just have some concerns that we're not in compliance currently with the AODA. And I know there is a legislated date listed for when we have to be in compliance. So it just concerns me. Not that I look at that and want to spend all that money, but we need to be accessible, and we are a municipality, so we do have requirements. So if through you to the appropriate staff member, what is the annual date that we must be in compliance with this piece of legislation?
Go ahead, Curtis. Who wants to speak to this? Curtis, are you going to speak to this?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, I can answer that question. So I did follow up with our consultant, the Harrington Group. So it will be the end of 2024 is when we're required to be compliant. However, we're only required to be compliant if we've done a significant renovation. So we don't have to go out and start demoing all these buildings that we have no plans to do that with. But whenever we do any significant renovation, or any renovation for that matter, we are required to meet code. So that's the guideline.
Okay.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
So I guess my only concern is, I mean, there's certain things like accessible, like a kitchen countertop being low enough, but like I would want to make sure that we could have accessibility through doorways, that the doorways are wide enough, and the bathrooms. Is that community center at the place where if somebody has an assisted device, they are not able to get in or get around in the building?
Go ahead, Curtis.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, currently, yes, that's the situation. It's essentially remains as built with limited AODA compliance.
Yeah, that's really concerning. So I don't know if we're at the point with everything we're adding that we could add this, like maybe Maria could speak to that, because I know there's questions like earlier, Councillor Neal was talking about maybe building a new facility. It just concerns me when we have a city facility that eliminates part of the population.
So do you want to it won't be at in the next couple of days, but do you want a staff report back on the Allenburg Community Center? And then how do you want to handle that? Because this is something I think that needs a serious review, not just, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great suggestion. Have a report back where we actually analyze it. And we're going to have to make changes. I mean, we can't just leave it so that people aren't able to access it because of their disability, right? That's not right. So I would appreciate that if staff could come back with a report and we could have some guidance on what to do, because even if we are to build a new building, that's going to take us years in the making, right? From finding the land, if we have to find the land, to planning it and then building it. So whether we want to spend money, it's not throwing good money after bad money. We have to make sure that everyone in our community can access our facility. So yes, if I get the support, I don't know, do I need to put a motion on the floor
A motion for staff report back on the AODA situation for community center? Is that how you want to, is that the language you want? I'll leave it with you to, it's been captured. I need a seconder. Counselor Neal. Okay, any further discussion on that? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, we're at 9 o'clock, so what I want to do is to get Maria to give us a quick update, and then we'll adjourn and reconvene tomorrow. So Maria, can you please give us an update of where we are at the end of first budget session?
Yeah, sure, Mr. Mayor. The levy hasn't changed from the last 4.86%. We have added the Lake Gibson Corridor Master Plan of $150,000 funded from reserves, and we've added the design parking for Old Thoroldstone Road, Davis, $25,000 with developer funding, and patio fee elimination with a zero levy impact.
And the other two, we've added fire station and the operations center, correct?
Oh, yes, that's correct. Yeah, that was included in the 4.86%.
So we're at 486 starting tomorrow night, and then we'll reevaluate everything, and then we can look at alternative ways or whatever council decides. Councilor Wilson, what do you want to say before we leave?
I just wanted to ask through you, Mr. Mayor, to Maria, in your presentation when you had our original amount of 2.7, and then you said that portion was 1.1% of our tax outside of the region.
Yes.
So what would 4.86 be for our portion then?
1.97%.
Okay.
Okay.
So now I have a motion, mover Councillor Senton, seconder Councillor Decker, that council receive the information provided by DF 2021-50 for information, and that council continue the budget discussion on Wednesday, January 26th at 6:30 p.m. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Great session. Appreciate everybody and all the input, and I look forward to tomorrow evening at 6:30. Can I get a motion to adjourn? I got a mover, Councillor Decker, seconder, Councillor Longo, that this meeting is hereby adjourned at 9:02 p.m. Thank you.
See you, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.